Welcome to True Crime Talks, where the stories are stranger than fiction. Today, we unravel the chilling tale of a honeymoon paradise turned deadly, a story of love, lies, and a shocking betrayal. In a quaint, charming town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a leisurely pace. The town was known for its close-knit community, where everyone knew each other's names and stories. It was here that Robert, a successful businessman in his early 30s, found himself one sunny afternoon. Robert had built a thriving career in the city, but often escaped to the town for its tranquility and charm. He was a man of routine, disciplined and focused, but something about the town always made him feel alive in a way the city never could. One particular weekend, Robert decided to visit the town's art gallery, a small but renowned space that showcased local talent. The gallery was hosting an exhibition, and the air was filled with the hum of conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. Robert wasn't much of an art enthusiast, but he enjoyed the atmosphere and the chance to unwind. As he wandered through the gallery, his eyes were drawn to a striking painting, a vivid, abstract piece that seemed to pulse with energy. Standing beside it was the artist herself, Margaret. Margaret was unlike anyone Robert had ever met. She was elegant, with a magnetic presence that seemed to light up the room. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and warmth. She was dressed in a flowing, bohemian-style dress that seemed to mirror the creativity of her art. Robert was instantly captivated. He introduced himself, and the two began talking. Margaret was witty, intelligent, and passionate about her work. She spoke of her art with such fervor that Robert found himself hanging on every word. Their connection was immediate. Margaret's free-spirited nature was a perfect counterbalance to Robert's structured life. She introduced him to a world of spontaneity and creativity that he had never experienced before. They spent hours talking that evening, and by the time the gallery closed, Robert knew he wanted to see her again. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. They went on long walks through the town's cobblestone streets, shared meals at cozy cafes, and spent countless nights talking under the stars. Margaret's art studio became a second home for Robert, a place where he felt truly at peace. As their bond deepened, Robert began to envision a future with Margaret. He admired her independence, her talent, and the way she made him feel alive. Margaret, in turn, seemed equally enamored with Robert. She often spoke of how he grounded her, how his steadiness complemented her whirlwind of creativity. Their love story felt like something out of a fairy tale, and it wasn't long before Robert decided to propose. He chose a quiet evening at the art gallery where they had first met. Under the soft glow of the gallery lights, he got down on one knee and asked Margaret to marry him. Her eyes filled with tears as she said yes, and the two embraced, surrounded by the art that had brought them together. The wedding planning began almost immediately. Friends and family were thrilled for the couple, and the town buzzed with excitement. Margaret's artistic flair was evident in every detail of the wedding, from the hand-painted invitations to the unique floral arrangements. The ceremony itself was a beautiful celebration of love, held in a sunlit garden filled with laughter and joy. As Robert and Margaret exchanged vows, it seemed as though nothing could ever come between them. They were the picture of happiness, a couple destined for a lifetime of love and adventure. After the wedding, the newlyweds set off for their honeymoon, a luxurious resort on a remote tropical island. It was the perfect escape, a place where they could leave the world behind and focus on each other. As they boarded the plane, Robert felt a sense of contentment he had never known. He was starting a new chapter of his life with the woman he loved, and the future seemed brighter than ever. Little did he know, the paradise that awaited them would soon unravel into a nightmare, revealing secrets that would change everything. The honeymoon destination was everything Robert and Margaret had dreamed of, a secluded, luxurious resort on a remote tropical island. The resort was a slice of paradise, with pristine white sand beaches, crystal-clear turquoise waters, and lush green jungles that seemed to stretch endlessly. Their villa was a private haven, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, offering breathtaking views of the horizon. The first few days were nothing short of magical. The couple spent their mornings lounging on the beach, their afternoons exploring the island's hidden coves, and their evenings dining under the stars. It was the perfect start to their new life together. Robert felt a deep sense of contentment. He had always been a man of routine, but Margaret's spontaneity and zest for life had opened him up to new experiences. They went snorkeling in vibrant coral reefs, hiked through dense jungles to discover hidden waterfalls, and even tried their hand at paddleboarding. Margaret's laughter was infectious, and her joy seemed to fill every moment. Robert couldn't remember a time when he had felt so alive, so connected to someone. It was as if the world had faded away, leaving only the two of them in their own private paradise. But as the days passed, Robert began to notice subtle changes in Margaret's behavior. At first, they were small things, moments of distraction, a flicker of irritation in her eyes, or a sudden silence that felt heavy and unspoken. One evening, as they sat on their villa's balcony watching the sunset, Margaret seemed distant, her gaze fixed on the horizon, but her mind clearly elsewhere. When Robert asked if something was wrong, she brushed it off with a smile, claiming she was just tired. He believed her, but the unease lingered in the back of his mind. The incidents grew more unsettling. One night, Robert awoke to find Margaret standing at the foot of their bed, staring at him with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. In her hand, she held a knife, its blade glinting in the moonlight. Before Robert could react, Margaret quickly hid the knife behind her back and laughed softly, dismissing it as a harmless joke. She claimed she had been sleepwalking and didn't remember picking up the knife. Robert tried to shake off the encounter, telling himself it was just a strange, isolated incident. But the image of Margaret standing there, the knife in her hand, haunted him. Margaret's mood swings became more pronounced. One moment she would be laughing and carefree, the next she would snap at Robert over the smallest things. Her once charming quirks now seemed tinged with something darker, something Robert couldn't quite put his finger on. He found himself walking on eggshells, unsure of what might trigger her anger. The paradise that had once felt so idyllic now seemed like a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside but filled with tension and unease. Robert's suspicions grew when he began to notice strange details about Margaret's belongings. One afternoon while she was out for a swim, Robert decided to organize their luggage. As he opened Margaret's suitcase, he found a hidden compartment he hadn't noticed before. Inside, he discovered a collection of wigs, makeup, and male clothing. The discovery left him stunned. He had no idea why Margaret would have these items, and the secrecy surrounding them made him question everything he thought he knew about her. When Margaret returned, Robert confronted her, his voice trembling with a mix of confusion and fear. Margaret's reaction was calm, almost too calm. She explained that she had been a transvestite for years, a part of her identity she had kept hidden out of fear of judgment. She assured Robert that it didn't change who she was or how she felt about him. Robert tried to be understanding, but the revelation shook him to his core. He couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Margaret might be hiding. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship now felt fragile, like a thread on the verge of snapping. As the days went on, Robert's unease grew. The paradise that had once been a dream now felt like a nightmare. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, that the woman he had married was not who she seemed to be. The tension between them was palpable, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect honeymoon. Robert knew that something had to give, but he had no idea just how dark the truth would turn out to be. The days following Margaret's revelation about her hidden identity were tense and unsettling. Robert tried to process what he had learned, but the more he thought about it, the more questions arose. Why had Margaret kept this part of herself a secret? What else was she hiding? The trust that had once been the bedrock of their relationship now felt like shifting sand, unstable and unreliable. Robert found himself watching Margaret more closely, noticing little things he had overlooked before, the way she sometimes avoided eye contact, the way her laughter didn't always reach her eyes, the way she seemed to be holding something back. Margaret, for her part, seemed to sense Robert's growing unease. She became more affectionate, more attentive, as if trying to reassure him that nothing had changed between them. But her efforts only made Robert more suspicious. He couldn't shake the feeling that her kindness was a mask, a carefully constructed facade designed to keep him from digging deeper. The paradise that had once felt like a dream now felt like a stage, and Robert couldn't tell if he was the audience or the unwitting participant in a performance he didn't understand. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Robert decided to confront Margaret again. They were sitting on the balcony of their villa, the ocean stretching out before them, the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below. The setting was serene, but the atmosphere between them was anything but. Robert took a deep breath and asked Margaret point blank why she had never told him about her past. He wanted to understand, to make sense of the secrets that seemed to be piling up between them. Margaret's response was calm, almost too calm. She explained that she had been a transvestite for years, a part of her identity she had kept hidden out of fear of judgment. She assured Robert that it didn't change who she was or how she felt about him. She spoke of the struggles she had faced, the rejection and ridicule she had endured, and how she had learned to hide this part of herself to protect her heart. Her words were heartfelt, and for a moment Robert felt a pang of sympathy, but as he looked into her eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something she wasn't telling him. The conversation left Robert more conflicted than ever. He wanted to believe Margaret, to trust her, but the seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were growing rapidly. He began to notice other things, small inconsistencies in her stories, moments when her behavior didn't quite add up. One night he awoke to find Margaret standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. When he asked her what she was doing, she turned to him with a strange, almost vacant expression and said she had been thinking about their future. Her tone was flat, her words devoid of emotion, and it sent a chill down Robert's spine. As the days passed, Robert's suspicions deepened. He began to feel like he was living with a stranger, someone he didn't truly know. The woman he had married, the woman he had thought he loved, now seemed like a mystery, a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. He found himself questioning everything, her motives, her past, even her love for him. The paradise that had once been a dream now felt like a prison, a beautiful but suffocating cage. One afternoon, while Margaret was out for a swim, Robert decided to search her belongings. He told himself he was looking for answers, for something that would help him make sense of the chaos in his mind. As he rummaged through her suitcase, he found a small, locked box hidden beneath her clothes. His heart raced as he tried to open it, but it was securely fastened. The box felt heavy in his hands, and he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside would change everything. When Margaret returned, Robert confronted her about the box. Her reaction was immediate and intense. She snatched it from his hands, her eyes flashing with anger. For a moment, she seemed like a completely different person, someone Robert didn't recognize. Then, just as quickly, her expression softened, and she apologized, claiming the box contained personal items she wasn't ready to share. Her explanation did little to ease Robert's fears. He knew there was more to the story, something dark and hidden, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The tension between Robert and Margaret had reached a breaking point. The once idyllic honeymoon had become a battleground of suspicion and mistrust. Robert's discovery of the locked box had only deepened his unease, and Margaret's reaction had left him more convinced than ever that she was hiding something significant. The paradise that had once been a dream now felt like a nightmare, a beautiful facade masking a dark and dangerous reality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the ocean, Robert decided to confront Margaret once more. They were sitting on the balcony of their villa, the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below providing a stark contrast to the silence between them. Robert took a deep breath and asked Margaret to open the box. He needed to know what was inside, to understand the secrets she was keeping from him. Margaret's face remained impassive, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something, fear, anger, or perhaps both. For a long moment, Margaret said nothing. Then, with a sigh, she reached for the box and placed it on the table between them. She unlocked it with a small key she kept on a chain around her neck and opened the lid. Inside, Robert found a collection of photographs, letters, and documents. As he sifted through the contents, his heart sank. The photographs showed Margaret in various disguises, some as a man, others as different women. The letters were filled with cryptic messages, references to past relationships, and hints of manipulation and deceit. The documents revealed a history of aliases, fake identities, and a trail of broken hearts and ruined lives. Robert's hands trembled as he looked up at Margaret. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's expression was cold, her eyes devoid of the warmth and affection Robert had once known. She leaned back in her chair and began to speak, her voice calm and measured. She admitted to a history of manipulation and deceit, using her charm and beauty to exploit others for personal gain. She spoke of past relationships, of men and women who had fallen for her lies only to be left broken and betrayed. She explained that she had hidden this part of herself from Robert, fearing that he would reject her if he knew the truth. Robert felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The woman he had married, the woman he had thought he loved, was a stranger, a master manipulator who had played him like a fool. He struggled to process the enormity of her betrayal, the depth of her deception. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you marry me?" Margaret's lips curled into a cold, calculating smile. "Because you were perfect," she said, "successful, wealthy, and naive. I knew you would be easy to manipulate, easy to control, and for a while it was perfect. But you had to go and ruin it, didn't you? You had to dig too deep, ask too many questions." Robert's mind raced as he tried to make sense of her words. He realized with a sinking feeling that he had been nothing more than a pawn in her game, a means to an end. The love he had felt for her, the future he had envisioned, had all been a lie. He stood up, his legs unsteady, and took a step back from the table. "I need to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. Margaret's smile widened, and she reached for a glass of wine on the table. "Oh, Robert," she said, her tone almost pitying, "you're not going anywhere." Before he could react, she tossed the contents of the glass into his face. The liquid burned his eyes, and he stumbled back, disoriented. As his vision blurred and his body grew weak, he realized with horror that she had slipped something into his drink. The last thing Robert saw before darkness claimed him was Margaret's cold, calculating smile. The paradise that had once been a dream had become a nightmare, and he was trapped in a web of lies and deceit with no way out. As he lost consciousness, he knew that his life would never be the same, that the woman he had married was not who she seemed, and that the truth was far darker than he could have ever imagined. The next few days were a blur for Robert. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind foggy and his body weak. He was vaguely aware of Margaret moving around the villa, her presence a constant, menacing shadow. She fed him small sips of water and bits of food, just enough to keep him alive, but not enough to regain his strength. Robert's thoughts were fragmented, his memories hazy, but one thing was clear: he was in grave danger. The woman he had married, the woman he had once loved, was not who she claimed to be. She was a predator, and he was her prey. When Robert finally regained full consciousness, he found himself lying on the floor of the villa's living room. His head throbbed, and his body felt heavy, as if weighed down by an invisible force. He tried to move, but his limbs refused to cooperate. Margaret was sitting across the room, watching him with a cold, calculating expression. She held a glass of wine in one hand, swirling the liquid slowly as she studied him. "You're awake," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Good. We need to talk." Robert's mouth was dry, his throat parched. He tried to speak, but the words came out as a croak. Margaret stood up and walked over to him, crouching down so they were eye level. She placed a hand on his cheek, her touch cold and impersonal. "You've been such a disappointment, Robert," she said, her tone almost pitying. "I had such high hopes for us. But you had to go and ruin everything, didn't you? You had to dig too deep, ask too many questions." Robert's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had happened. He remembered the confrontation on the balcony, the locked box, the photographs and letters that revealed Margaret's dark past. He remembered the glass of wine she had thrown in his face, the burning sensation, the sudden weakness that had overtaken him. He realized with a sinking feeling that she had drugged him, that she had been keeping him sedated, trapped in a nightmare of her making. Margaret stood up and walked over to the table, where the locked box still sat. She opened it and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid, holding it up to the light. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, her voice almost conversational. "It's a sedative, a very powerful one. Just a few drops and you're out like a light. It's been so useful, Robert, you have no idea." Robert's heart pounded as he realized the extent of her plan. She had been drugging him, keeping him weak and compliant while she plotted her next move. He tried to sit up to fight back, but his body refused to obey. Margaret walked back over to him and crouched down again, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "You're not going anywhere, Robert," she said, her voice low and menacing. "Not until I'm done with you." The next few hours were a nightmare. Margaret moved around the villa, packing her belongings and cleaning up any evidence of her presence. She spoke to Robert as if he were a child, explaining her plan in chilling detail. She would stage his death as a tragic accident, a fall from the villa's balcony. She would play the grieving widow, garnering sympathy and support from everyone who knew them, and then she would disappear, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and ruined lives, just as she had done so many times before. As the sun began to rise, Margaret finished her preparations. She walked over to Robert and crouched down one last time, her expression almost regretful. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, Robert," she said, her voice soft, "but you left me no choice." She leaned down and pressed a kiss to his forehead, her lips cold and unfeeling. Then she stood up and walked away, leaving him alone in the villa. Robert's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out, but his body was too weak, his thoughts too fragmented. He heard the sound of the villa's door closing, and then silence. He was alone, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. The paradise that had once been a dream had become a living hell, and he knew that his time was running out. As darkness closed in around him, Robert realized with a sinking feeling that he might never escape the web of lies and deceit that Margaret had woven around him.